What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the quarantine zone again, and this time we got Pete of the Almighty Half. Thank you so much for your time today, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, dude.
Yep, it's so awesome to have you here. I think it's fair to say that you guys have had a fairly busy couple of years with Hive being released this year, of Rotten Rune being released the year before. So really, just how has the songwriting process been? It seems like you guys have been at a never-ending creative spree.
Yeah, that is really safe to say, especially with being locked down all year. We've never really stopped songwriting. So like half or Hive was written before I was in the band, and by the time I joined the band, pretty much all of Rotten Ruin was written. And I'm like, oh man, like I'm not even going to be on this album. They're like, no, you'll write solos, don't worry. And by the way, we have like 24 other songs that are in process, so jump in. It's like a never-ending songwriting process.
That's pretty impressive, I gotta say.
Yeah, dude, it's busy. It's crazy busy. Like we're in the middle of, I guess, figuring out what we want the next album to be. And we got to a point where we're like, all right, we actually have to stop. We're whittling down our list. This is what we're working with. Only these songs. Just if you write anything, don't tell us about it. Like, keep it on
the side. The fact that is that you guys have to like literally force each other to stop. I think that's a pretty good position to be in, right?
Yeah, this is the first band I've been in where it's been like that. Like some of the other bands I've been in, like we were scheduled to start recording, and like the night before, we're like, oh crap, we need one more song. Like we got to finish this song. We got to write this solo. We got to write these lyrics. And this is more like a well-oiled machine.
Being that you did play in a lot of other bands such as Ophidius and Dystrophy and all of these other awesome bands, when you joined Hath, were you listening to the material and being like, okay, this is how I have to play, this is what it's about, or did the band did Frank and everybody else in the band kind of want you to like bring a little bit of your own mix into Hath?
A bit of both. So Frank and AJ are also in Ophidius, so like we've been playing together, I don't know, probably 7-8 years now. So it's like a really comfy kind of rapport when it comes down to like songwriting and performing. But Half kind of popped up because Ophidius was just all instrumental tech death. Our kind of approach to it was, all right, let's write the hardest thing we can, and then we'll learn how to play it. Where Hath was like, Frank was thinking, I want to be able to enjoy playing these songs. I don't want to think about like, okay, it's going to be this time change, and I gotta warm up for an hour just to hit this one riff. He's like, no, I want it to be fun. I want it to be memorable, not just kind of riff salad. So coming into it, I was already really comfortable working with them, but at the same time, like my first few like songs and riffs I put out there, they were like, that's a little much. Like maybe that's an Ophid song. Like just like cool, chill with all the crazy tech death. So it is a bit of a learning curve for me to get used to that style.
Yeah, well, it's funny because like being that 75% of Ophidius is in Hath, I'd imagine that there has to be almost kind of like you have to like distance yourself from Ophidius as much as possible when it comes to writing the music for Hath, right?
Yes and no. I think what makes it really easy is they're two very different bands. One's got a vocalist, the other doesn't. So that being the biggest thing. So when we're writing for Hath, it's like, okay, we can't, make this riff so crazy where it's like gravity blasts and sweeping for 3 minutes, because Frank can't sing over that. Or AJ needs to be able to play a 20-minute set, a 30-minute set. Like he can't just do straight double bass and blast beats without any kind of break or any kind of groove. So that makes it a little easier. We kind of have some I guess styles and tricks we stick to with Hath. Like we know, okay, we want it to sound this way. We have these 4 or 5 different types of riffs that we go to, and that works really well. Where Ophidius, it's like, okay, if we want to take a break, or if we want this next piece, we got to think of what's an orchestra going to do, and like it's a very different kind of approach to songwriting.
I think it's fair to say, and what I like about Hath is like I feel like, and Ophidius I feel like is a great like band to get lost in, to be impressed with technical capabilities and all that. But with Hath, I feel like there's a lot more structure behind it. You say everything you have to say without saying too much.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's. I'd say the biggest difference between like Hath and Ophidius is Hath isn't afraid to lean into a bunch of different styles. So like we've got hooks, we've got the little sing-songy parts, we've got some tech flair type riffs, but we're also not afraid to like go into a breakdown or just a groove, just to make it fun. Like first and foremost, we want to be able to enjoy what we're playing.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I felt like there was just on the Hive album alone, I felt like, going from Apparition to Swarm to, Commandment, like, I feel like there's almost kind of like a good amount of experimentation, but you also kind of don't get lost into it.
Yeah, for sure. That was like one of the biggest differences the first time I heard Hive. So like I heard that before I was in the band, and I kind of got like low-key ticked at Frank and AJ. I was like, these songs are so good. Why aren't these Ophidius songs? And they were like, oh no, it's a different band. I'm like, man, like we could be using these. And they're like, no, it's something else. But yeah, it's I guess a little more straightforward in terms of how songs are written.
Yeah, and it's also because you have a vocalist, and I mean, like with a vocalist, I feel like it almost structures the arrangement in a certain way, where almost like sometimes the guitars have to be like adjusted to fit the vocal style, right?
Oh yeah, and like we're still kind of figuring that out with songs that have been out for a year, 2, 3 years now, where we'll just be jamming in like the practice room at like a band practice and just like messing around. All of us will just stop on a beat while Frank is screaming, and then we'll all kind of look around like, oh, that really worked. We should have put that on an album. And that so the songs we play live end up being in some cases pretty different than how they were recorded, just because we're always just kind of having fun with it.
Yeah, and that's very important because some people think your music is so technically like impressive that like it is kind of very dictating, and there is kind of like a my way or the highway. But it seems like you guys, especially with on the creative surge that you guys have been on, you always have fun with it as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's always like a big, I guess a big thing we focus on is just being able to enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. For your guitar work, do you have a theoretical element behind your style? Like, okay, I have to work off of this scale and this mode and this key, or are you more on the self-taught side and you tend to improvise with the songs a little bit?
Oh, I'm terrible at improvising.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, I'm awful. I absolutely overthink everything, write it out. I took guitar lessons all through high school. Just at a local music shop with like the metal guy who was teaching there, and they taught me a ton, like scales, modes, key changes, arpeggios, how to sweep, how to tap, and like I wasn't great at it in high school, but I always had that in the back of my head when it came to songwriting and being in a band. Like, oh, the modes have to work like this, or the keys have to work like this, and I'd say for like years I was stuck in that mindset, and now like I'm trying to get out of it. Like it's definitely a work in progress, where it's like, okay, rather than write out a solo note for note in Guitar Pro or something like that, maybe just jam over it for an hour, jam over the riff, see what comes out, and then work off that.
Okay.
Versus like versus like Greg, our bassist, is an insane improviser. Like he's got the theory background, but like I think the solos on Replicated and Swarm off the Hive EP, those are Greg, and he just came up with them on the spot.
Wow.
Yeah, so like I'm sitting here trying to learn them, and I'm like, how did you do this? He's like, I don't know, I just feel it out. I'm like, you son of a bitch, this is really good.
That's what I've noticed with on the technical level of Half, because I've noticed that the guitar work has like a lot of contrast into it. Like, okay, you could tell that there is like a liberating element behind it, but also they know what they're doing. Like, I feel like you have like the best of both worlds.
Yeah. And I think what really helps is all of us play guitar too. So like I can't speak to how AJ should play drums, but if Frank and I are stuck on a riff or we're stuck on a song, Greg and AJ can jump in and be like, oh well, I think this would be a good idea, or I think this would be like a good kind of drone over it, or a techie riff over this, just to break it up and make it feel more interesting.
Yeah, and do you sometimes like go into songwriting with a preconceived idea of how you want it to sound? Because I know you mentioned that like improvising is not really your forte, but at the same time, like do you go into everything knowing this is how it has to be done as well, or is there any happy accidents?
Oh, I'd say like 90% of what we do is a happy accident. Mm-hmm. I tend to write just like a huge collection of riffs. Sometimes they work together, sometimes they don't, and I'll just bring it to the band. Whereas like AJ or Frank might write a full song start to finish. Like for me, I've got no idea what it's going to sound like, and then I bring it to them, and we all kind of collaborate on my stuff, and then it turns into a song.
Wow. It's you almost kind of let the songs in the way like write themselves too at the same time. You're almost kind of like their humble guide.
I guess you could say that. I don't know how like some guys are able to just crank out solo album after solo album on top of being in a band too. I'm like, I struggle to get 5 songs together in a year or two, and you're here, dropping 10, 12 songs every 8 months.
Yeah. Now, also, there's the element of dystrophy that you also used to play with as well, right? Yep. So, when you're going into Ophidius and Hath with a different mind frame than that as well?
Yeah, like, so Dystrophy was my first band, like my first real band where everyone was kind of on the same page, like all through college and a bit after college. And that was just like, let's just be, well, it started as like, let's just play like fast death metal. And it ended up being like a weird blend of power metal and death metal to start. And then it turned into just like dirty Gorguts worship, like Morbid Angel meets Gorguts towards the end. And I feel like that band was all of us just trying to figure out what we liked. So, like for me, I really like the tech depth stuff, so I kind of went and did Ophidius and now Half, where Pete Lloyd, the other guitarist, got really into just like that dissonant death metal like Gorguts or Piron, Voivod, and he's got his band now, Replicant, which is like if you just went down that path. So, what's that poem, like fork in the woods, 2 paths diverge or something like that?
Yeah.
I went down the tech death path. He went down like the dissonant death metal path.
It's amazing how like you go in one direction or think that you have this idea in mind, and then you end up having a completely different path afterwards.
Yeah, it's wild. Like, I listen to the stuff Replicant does. I'm like, okay, I recognize that riff, not because it's a riff I've ever heard, but just having played with Pete for so long, I'm like, yeah, that sounds like Dystrophy plus, like, next level Dystrophy. He's just taking that direction.
Now, when it comes to writing like solos and writing riffs and all of that, do you find it easier to come up with ideas when you're kind of like alone with your guitar? I've always said that isolation is like the best fuel for creativity. Or do you sometimes find it easier to come up with ideas when you're in the company of your other bandmates?
Oh, alone for sure with solos. For riffs, group effort, but for solos, I need to kind of like lock myself away. Don't talk to me until it's done, and until like I can play it comfortably. Like if we're just jamming on a song live, and they're like, "Okay, a solo can go here," I will not try and play something until I have it like totally written out and figured out in my head. Like I don't know why it just screws with me. Like improvising, just I freeze up.
Yeah. I mean, because sometimes, like I've said, it's always good to be free in the songwriting process, but you also don't want to be directionless. And it's always good to like know what you're doing, but you don't want to be dictated. There is almost kind of like a constant arbitrary line.
Hmm. Yeah, and like again, kind of going to all the guys in the band play guitar. There have been times too where like I had an idea for a solo, and we're in the studio recording it, or I'd send a first pass of like a solo demo, and they're like, the first half of that, fantastic, don't touch it. The second half, I know you can do better. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, well, instead of doing this, what if you did A, B, and C? Like, play with that. And AJ and Frank have had input on my solos, or just like written little phrases like, this works better. And then what they wrote, like, totally changes the direction of the solo, and honestly does make it a lot better. So even that's still a pretty collaborative process.
Yeah, well, you know what it is too, like, and I could just be talking from like my own personal taste at this point, but like I've always said that a guitar soloing is pretty much like what the lead vocalist is supposed to do in terms of conveying imagery and conveying emotion and using a certain melody or a certain skill to, really drive the point of the song home. So like sometimes like a quick emotional solo is better than, a 3.5 minute solo where you're playing like 40 notes per second,
Yeah, and it's taken me at least like 20 years to learn that.
Better late than never.
Right? Like when you're 15, you just want to, be like Jason Becker, sweeping, 100 notes a second, all up and down the neck, 6, 7 string sweeps. And now I'm like, man, can I just get away with 5-10 seconds of just like bending and like sliding between a few notes? That sounds so much better.
You'll be in a
so
sludge metal band before you know it.
Yep.
But when it comes to like, because I also consider Haft's music to be kind of experimental at the same time, so it's also easy to try new things for you guys, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like when we've gotten like reviews or write-ups, it's always really interesting to see what people compare us to. Like a lot of times we get Behemoth, which is like, okay, no problem there. Or we'll get like, oh, they're like a deathcore band, like Lorna Shore. Like, I don't know where you got that, but okay. Or like, oh, they're like tech death, or like just black metal. I'm like, I don't know where you got that either, but sure. And it's kind of funny. Like we have a breakdown here and there, but I wouldn't say we're deathcore. We do some like black metal tremolo riffs, but we're not a black metal band.
I could definitely see you guys catering to multiple audiences, though. I could see you doing a tour with a band like 1349 or Behemoth or something like that, but then also see you tour with like a more tech-oriented band like Archspire or Obscura or something like that, and then I could see you on like a Summer Slaughter or with like some slam bands or deathcore bands, and then of course I could easily see you guys on a tour with Cannibal Corpse.
I'd love it. Any of them. Just start touring, please.
Yeah, I know. And that led me to my final question, actually, because when it comes to playing the material live, is there maybe a similar energy into playing live as you do when you're songwriting, or is playing live and songwriting almost two completely separate arts?
Songwriting, I'd say for me, starts very solitary. Like, I make my giant file of riffs, and then it becomes kind of a whatever process. I bring it around. I share it around, or I, have a few half songs written, and they turn into something very different. Whereas live, it is a different energy. I don't get nervous songwriting. I get very nervous playing live. But as soon as, we're a minute into the first song, I'm good. Like, it's just getting over that hump. And then I guess with writing, I don't start nervous. It's just like, whatever. And then when it's time to actually make the song, I get very nervous. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, is this song good enough? Is this a half song? Is this, does it just sound like another one of our songs, or is it boring or something like that?
Yeah, well, here's the brain picking question, because I started asking artists this, because in the end, when you're playing material live, you're just taking material from the album and replicating it in a live setting. So is there remotely anything creative about playing live?
Yes. I think it's something we could do more, and I think that's something that just comes out of doing it a lot, experimenting live and those happy accidents. But some of the most fun bands I've seen were the ones that, just take a break in the middle of the song and do a jam. Or, like, you see them messing with each other. You see band members messing with each other while they're on stage. And a lot of that comes down to, like, muscle memory. Just being so comfortable playing that song that, you can go over, screw with the drummer or screw with the bassist or whatever. And then while you're screwing with each other, the drummer might stop playing, or he might just start accenting notes you're playing. And then it becomes like a much more fun, collaborative process live.
Okay. So it's fair to say that maybe the live presence gets more creative as you do it more.
Yeah, I think that's pretty safe to say. It's definitely a learned process. It's not something you can really plan, like, at 2 minutes in, we're going to take a break, and then it's going to be a drum solo, and then it's going to be, back and forth between the guitar and bass. That'll never work. It's got to be a really organic kind of happening.
Yeah, and organic is always the best way to go.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today. Is there anything else with Hath that you would like to promote, like when we can be expecting some new music, since you guys are on like a never-ending creative spree? And obviously, when this virus is out of the fucking way, finally, can we maybe be expecting to make up the tour with Cognitive and Cryptoderia? Because I was looking forward to that tour so much.
Yeah, dude. And yeah, thank you for having me. A few quick shout outs, the remastered version of Hive just dropped. It's first time it's being pressed physically. So it's on vinyl, it's on CD, it's got a new song, Atropos. So that's really exciting for us. We never had the means to press it and do like a proper physical release. So we're really happy that Willow Tip is giving us that opportunity. Otherwise, because of COVID, we now do streaming. We do like music practices and all that streaming on Twitch or gaming on Twitch, twitch.tv/Hathband. You can find us there. We're just hanging out like every day, playing music or games. Oh. And then tour-wise, we absolutely want to. It's just a matter of figuring out when.
Yeah.
Things have to open up before we can commit to anything.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, we have an album, more like a skeleton of an album written. No timelines, no expectations of when it's going to come out, but I can safely say, compared to A Rotten Ruin, this album is pissed.
Ooh, I'm excited.
It's really, really fucking mad.
Well, there's no better of an appropriate time to. There couldn't be a more appropriate time to write a pissed off album.
Yep. Silver lining, I guess, all things considered, we can't tour, so we might as well write an album.
Yeah, and mark my words, I've been saying this to a lot of people. When this is officially over and we finally are able to get on with our lives, we will be entering, I think, the best era of music in history.
Man, I hope so.
Yep.
With everything going on, we need a break.
Yeah.
We need to crack a beer and just hang out.
How many
It's too
people though on your
stressful.
live streams though have been requesting Freebird? You guys to play Freebird?
Freebird, I think, has only happened twice. I get a lot of Metallica and a lot of Slayer.
I am genuinely surprised right now.
Yep. No, it's a new, like, interesting community we're kind of dipping a toe into.
Yeah, I think it's cool. It allows people to interact with you guys, and I think we live in a world now where people are always obsessed with what's like behind the music as well as the music itself. So it's cool that fans have gotten the opportunity to get to know you and Frank and everybody else.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if you see this happening more and more, even post-pandemic too. People want that engagement. They want to, I guess, have that insight, that exposure. And the barrier for entry is pretty much gone. You have a webcam, you have a little home interface, you can do guitar streams, you can do drum streams. Like, no one's there to tell you not to.
Yeah, of course. And on top of that, Frank is also a death metal encyclopedia. So, like, he's recommended me a lot of awesome bands before, and you guys should listen to what Frank has to say because, again, death metal encyclopedia.
Yep. Yeah. Every time I'm like, you should check out this band. He's like, which album? I already have like 3 of them. Like, man, I can't win with you.
I no. That's the ultimate challenge. In fact, listeners, find a death metal band as underground as possible. Odds are Frank has probably heard of them.
Yeah, tweet it at him, at Frank Hath. Challenge him.
Yep. Oh, let's make that happen. He's probably going to wake up and have like thousands of tweets now.
I hope so.
Let's do it. But thank you so much, Peter. Everybody, we are here with Peter of Hath. Be sure to check out the new reversion of Hive. It's absolutely kick-ass. Be sure to check out Of Rot and Ruin. New stuff coming very soon. We'll see you next time on Heavy New York.